The usually quiet neighborhood had transformed into a ticking time bomb this morning. Neighbors who had hoped to sleep in on their day off were instead startled awake by shouts and ready to tear apart the noisy couple in apartment 62. Some residents were already in the hallway, rolling up their sleeves, while others cursed aloud, outraged by the disturbance. Peace in this building had barely taken hold before it was shattered. Right after the previous tenant, a mother with 2 infants who cried almost around the clock had finally moved out. And now, yet again, there was trouble. The conflict had everyone on edge. Periods of calm were broken by intense outbursts, and if at first everyone had patiently hoped that the couple would either reconcile or part ways for good, now they'd lost hope and were simply fed up. Shouting on a Sunday morning was too much for anyone. A large man banged on the door, pounding persistently, but no one answered, and the argument only intensified. "This is it. I'm done with this," he shouted, his voice echoing down the corridor. "Idiots. Yelling on a Sunday morning. You're all a bunch of jobless jerks. Some of us actually work and only get 1 day to sleep in." His fist struck the door, denting it. "Shut up or break up, or I'll smash down this door and leave you both limping." His threats seemed to have an effect as he stomped back to his apartment. The yelling turned into a simmering, quieter argument, but by then, sleep was out of the question for most neighbors. On the staircase, 2 women gossiped animatedly about the drama. "I'll bet he's drunk again," one muttered. "I saw him stumbling home last night, already tipsy and barely walking straight. His poor wife, she'd be better off divorcing him. No kids, they're renting. What's she got to lose?" "I thought they were finally some normal neighbors," the other woman sighed. "Now look at them. Noisy, trashy behavior, and this is just better than the last tenants with their crying babies." Just then, the door of the apartment opened, and out came Nina, holding her dog on a leash. Her face was pale and tear-streaked, making her look years older. She walked down the stairs, clenching a plastic bag to clean up after her dog, her only friend left from her former happy life. She stood outside as her dog rolled happily in the grass, looking at her broken reflection in its innocent eyes. Suddenly, the neighbor who had pounded on her door earlier that morning stormed out of the building. His rage was unabated. "I swear I'll tear you both apart if I hear another word," he growled. Nina's dog, a white mixed breed, sprang in front of her, barking and baring its teeth, protecting its owner. The man took a cautious step back, raising his arm defensively. "Call off your mutt," he shouted. "You're an idiot, you know that? You could have had a good life, but you're stuck with him." He glared before his wife intervened, calling him back. Nina watched him go, her heart heavy. She didn't know how to explain to her neighbors that without her documents, she couldn't leave. Her husband had taken her passport, insurance card, even her bank card, and she had no idea where he kept them. She returned to her apartment, where her husband was still asleep, and went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Her dog followed her, a silent comfort. She feared more for its safety than her own. Her only remaining hope was to protect him, even if it meant enduring her own misery. As she set the table, her husband awoke and entered the kitchen, hungover and irritable. "Did that old man next door come after you?" he sneered. "I'll deal with him. He thinks he's untouchable, but I'll show him otherwise." Nina remained silent, barely listening. Her husband smirked and leaned in. "Tonight, my buddies are coming over, and you better not say a word, or you know what'll happen," he said menacingly. "Make sure there's enough booze and food. I've got it all worked out so no one will bother us. My buddy Julio and the police will make sure we're left alone." As the day wore on, her anxiety grew. By evening, their tiny apartment was filled with smoke and the raucous laughter of 12 men gambling, drinking, and shouting. Nina felt nauseous as she watched her husband lose money. She hated everything about these gatherings. The evening dragged on, the atmosphere thick with anticipation as her husband bet everything he could. Then, she heard him say something that made her blood run cold. "All right, enough playing around," he sneered. "I'll bet Nina." For a moment, the world around her stopped. She couldn't believe her ears. He was so eager to get those 600,000 that, just for a chance at it, he was willing to bet his wife, Nina, on the game. Leonid, who was always undressing her with his eyes, accepted the bet without hesitation. The game began, and Nina watched in horror as the cards flew across the table, while her husband continued to lose hand after hand. Without so much as a blink, he threw his last cards onto the table, spat on the floor, and declared his loss. Horrified, Nina backed away, but her husband barked, "Stand still, you fool. A gambling debt is a debt of honor." Leonid sneered, then ordered, "Get to the bedroom. There's no reason to soil this place." Her husband grabbed the dog by the scruff and pulled it close as it yelped. He squeezed its throat until it started choking. "I swear, I'll strangle it right in front of you," the drunkard bellowed. Nina, trembling and desperate, could only watch as Leonid threw her onto the table and began tugging at her underwear, all while her husband did nothing. Tears streaming down her face, Nina looked at her choking dog, writhing in her husband's grip, when suddenly a gunshot rang out, reverberating through the apartment and the entire building. The front door flew open. A woman burst into the apartment, a plain-looking woman with full lips and short hair. Leonid's wife, holding a shotgun, stormed in, aimed at the ceiling, and fired. Plaster rained down as everyone instinctively ducked. "You despicable fools! Prison is where you belong," she shouted furiously. Within moments, Pasha, having entered while the door was still open, froze in shock at the awful scene unfolding before him. "Let her go," Pasha demanded. "And drop the dog. I said, drop it," he yelled, snatching the dog and hurrying out with Nina towards his car. Leonid's wife turned to her husband. "Now, hand over the documents," she roared. At first, he sneered, but then she fired a shot at the chair, just inches from his leg, causing him to leap back. "You think I'm joking? I'd kill every last one of you if I had to." Her voice boomed through the room, loud enough for the neighbors gathering outside to hear. Pasha, now understanding the gravity of the situation, stayed to protect this brave woman if necessary. Soon after, Nina and her dog safely descended to the car. The police, summoned an hour ago, had yet to arrive. "You want what?" Leonid's husband sneered, as his wife insisted he turn over the documents. A shot inched close to his leg finally made him jump. Grumbling, he went to the bathroom, pried up a tile to retrieve a stash of documents, and pulled a card from his wallet. He tossed them over, defeated. Leonid's wife turned to Pasha. "Call the regional police before I lose my nerve with these people. The local police won't come. They're all tied up with this lot." The pair waited for law enforcement, and when they finally arrived, a full-fledged operation ensued, arresting everyone present. Afterwards, Leonid's wife accompanied Nina and her dog downstairs. "It'll be a long drive," she murmured, "so we'll only stop for gas." As they sped away, Nina thanked her, choking up with emotion. The woman responded quietly, "The documents, the card, it's all yours. It's over. You're free now." They drove in silence until they reached the first gas station, 300 kilometers down the road. As they stopped to stretch and feed the dog, Leonid's wife finally shared her story. "I found out about you only a month ago. I overheard my husband talking with yours about something awful. I was terrified, but saw no way out. When I finally had a chance, I went to the regional police and told them everything. They said they'd been after this gang for a while. I promised to bring them the whole group in one go if they would grant us immunity after the bust. I returned, got a gun, and made a plan." Nina listened in shock. "When I saw him grab the dog, I knew he was using it to hurt you. But now we're leaving, and no one's coming after us. We've cut ties for good. I know memories don't heal fast, but you have enough money to start over." They continued their journey, the dark countryside passing by until Nina eventually fell asleep. Leonid's wife, driving, glanced occasionally at the woman resting on the back seat beside her loyal dog. She could hardly forget the nightmare that had taken place in that apartment, but she vowed to herself that Nina would never be alone again. As dawn broke, they reached a small town and stopped for fuel and food. Back in the car, Leonid's wife handed Nina a hot sandwich, which she ate with gratitude, sharing a piece with her dog, who seemed equally exhausted. A few hours later, they pulled up to a small cottage where a kind woman welcomed them. Nina explained her situation, grateful for a place to stay where she could finally feel safe. With heartfelt thanks, she bid her brave rescuer farewell. Now alone, with the dog beside her, she looked around, feeling an unfamiliar sense of relief and happiness. Over the next month, Nina completed her divorce and finalized the cottage purchase, finally able to live in peace. Though she sometimes had nightmares, she was now free and learning to feel safe again. Eventually, she even received news of her ex-husband's death in prison, freeing her from the last shadow of her past. One peaceful morning by the river, she watched her dog frolic in the water, grateful to be surrounded by friends who had been like family. "Are the nightmares still haunting you?" Leonid's wife asked. Nina nodded, but with each passing day she felt lighter. Her life was beginning anew, was